Hi, this is Marina from Darkstar Astrology, bringing you the new moon on April 26th, and it will fall in Taurus Decan 1. Now, that means that the springtime mythical theme continues with yet more activation of grain goddess Ceres, or Demeter as she's known in the Greek pantheon. This new moon makes no aspects to the conventional planets, but it is actually conjunct asteroid Demeter. Now, Demeter as an asteroid isn't used much. It's one of the ones that you have to look up, especially if you want to find out where it is in your chart. And yeah, I wouldn't normally stick it in, but since it's just a bit of synchronicity here, since there was no aspects to this moon whatsoever, I thought, oh, well, let's just see what asteroid it's conjunct. And well, there it is. It's very fitting with the springtime theme anyway. Now, the new moon also aligns with fixed star Metala, which is also connected to Ceres, and you'll see why later on. We also have Mercury retrograde travelling through this part of the sky as well, which highlights the myth of Andromeda too, which is also another mother-daughter theme. So we've got this kind of cyclical passing on from the mother to the daughter, very matriarchal theme going on, which is really what cycles are all about as well, and all the triple goddess, maiden, mother and crone theme as well. So this new moon clearly symbolizes a rite of passage then. The idealistic but naive virgin blossoms into the responsible and realistic mother. So the new moon falls at 6 degrees Taurus, and in this Decan 1, there are some other major stars too, which will add to the pot too. Now, Mirac is the first one, and that's the one that's being activated by Mercury retrograde. We had the Sun conjunct Mercury on that just a few days ago. That brings trouble with the opposite sex owing to indiscretions, bad for domestic affairs, and honour through martial matters. Mira, which is at 1 degree of Taurus, that's when linked with the moon, melancholy will then appear. Hamal, which is at 9 degrees Taurus, is patient, slow success through hard work, trouble through love affairs, but favourable for marriage. Marriage partner gains by business or speculation. So in my research for this decan, I did find some indications of the moon and Mirac's sexual indiscretions. So the following natives all had their moon here in Taurus Decan 1. Hugh Grant was caught having oral sex with the prostitute Divine Brown in a public place. Annie Sprinkle made a career out of indiscretion. Prince Charles was ridiculed over Tampon Gate with Camilla. I know these are all quite far back in time, but maybe some people might remember them. And Monica Lewinsky, well, need I say more about her? Even Hamal has trouble with love affairs. So it seems that Moon Taurus 1 needs to remain within the institution of marriage to keep out of trouble. Generally then, caring for children will have a stabilizing effect at this time, and the moon is exalted also in this decan of Taurus, which sounds good and mostly does promise material abundance. The only problem can be if things come too easily to us at this time, so then we can be prone to complacency. In that case, the devil could make work for idle hands, and the indulgent and decadent tendencies could start to kick in. So during the Taurian flavoured new moon in April, family commitments will help keep us on the straight and narrow. Having the responsibility of dependence ensures that we keep on ploughing ahead and thereby avoid tempting but useless distractions. This will keep the new moon abundance flowing rather than stagnating. Otherwise, we are tempted into immediate sensual pleasures rather than investing in the future. This is a great time to look at real estate, as the Taurus new moon brings luck with family property. Storing money as bricks and mortar also means that there is less temptation to spend it on frivolous activities. So as I said earlier, the new moon is conjunct the fixed star Metala and asteroid Demeter. which, as I said before, is the Greek version of Ceres, the Roman Ceres. Now, Metala in Triangulum is associated with Ceres because she asked Jupiter to put it in the sky to represent her island Sicily, which is actually shaped like a triangle as well. Ceres also intended it as a gift to her daughter Persephone. So, like nearby constellations Andromeda, which is the home of star Merak, and Cassiopeia, which is the mother of Andromeda, there is this mother-daughter connection that I was talking about. Noonan, astrologer Noonan, says that Metala indicates those of a just nature and those whose living is made in the legal profession, while Robson says Triangulum is said to give a just, companionable, truthful, righteous and benevolent nature with interest in architecture and Freemasonry, because it's the triangle, I guess. Another version of the myth concerning Triangulum, the constellation, says that Jupiter gave Sicily to Persephone, daughter of Ceres, as a wedding present on her marriage to Pluto. Other things to do with Triangulum is the fact that the sickle of Saturn, the one that he actually used to castrate his father Uranus, actually fell on Sicily. And the astronomical glyphs for both Saturn and Asteroid Ceres have a sickle. The handle down sickle is the symbol of Ceres, and the handle up sickle is the symbol of Saturn. So this is really interesting. They have this, both have this connection with Triangulum as well. Ceres and Saturn, to me, seem to have a connection to ancestors, their cycles, and then how they connect to their descendants. And also you could think of it as like cutting the cord, the umbilical cord as well. Now, although Demeter is basically the Greek version of Ceres, she also has some other interesting connections that Ceres doesn't. They're both known as the goddess of grain and agriculture, but Demeter actually is also associated with horses. Now, the story goes that Demeter, as mare goddess, was pursued by Poseidon and hid from him among the horses of King Onkeos, but could not conceal her divinity. In the form of a stallion, Poseidon caught and covered her. Demeter was furious at Poseidon's assault, and in this furious form, she is known as Demeter Erinis. In Arcadia, Demeter's mare form was worshipped into historical times, and they have found statues of her depicted with a horse's head with snaky hair, so in a kind of Medusa way as well. And Medusa is also connected with Ceres too. So this angry Demeter Erinis, I wondered if there was going to be anything in the news about, well, protests against rape. But all I could find really, Sweden again, and this was April the 14th. 2 asylum seekers standing a trial for raping a Swedish girl and streaming the crime live on Facebook won't be facing deportation if found guilty. I'm just thinking, how could they not be found guilty? And no angry damsels. I thought there might be some angry damsels protesting against rape culture. I mean, this is rape culture on Facebook. Lovely. I mean, what a world we live in, where if you talk about those rapists on Facebook, you could probably get blocked or banned. Yet people can film it live, and I don't know. Are they banned from Facebook for hate crimes? It's mental world. Anyway, we also have the angry police wives protest. So these are the angry damsels of Mercury retrograde as well. They staged a protest on the eve of the French presidential elections, which was, I think, yesterday or the day before. And today, as I speak, it's the French election. But in case you didn't get the news in America, several police officers were injured and one was killed by an Islamist armed with a Kalashnikov rifle. So this protest was over 100 wives, husbands and other partners of serving police officers marched in Paris to protest what they see as a failure on the part of the Socialist Party government to protect officers like the ones targeted in the deadly shooting on April the 20th it was. So it's interesting that the French did actually get out and protest about this, whereas in England, in London, when we had a police officer got killed then as well in front of the Houses of Parliament, there wasn't any protest there from the wives of police officers. So I think maybe, Paris has had a lot more terrorism there. So I think before this election, the heat is heating up, isn't it, really? But basically, this moon is quite a benign one. It's really about ploughing on. Ploughing is very much the decan of Taurus that we're into now. And we've just entered the fixed season. We're in the middle of spring, really. So the weather is we know what to expect. The fixed signs are mid-season, where everything's kind of fallen into its groove. So you're into the rhythm of the season now. But there's still, it's funny, even when you've got into this kind of stability, there's still these temptations. And I think people who are just too busy working won't fall into the trap of being tempted. But those who maybe don't have kids, I'm thinking of couples who don't have children at this time of the year. They are more likely to kind of stray because they have a bit more energy to spare for affairs, whereas people who have a family and job, they're just basically knackered at the end of the day to be tempted away. But there is that danger at the moment with this new moon. But what we can learn from it is willpower. See, one of the things I think that if you don't have a religious upbringing, I don't think we're taught willpower very much these days. And it's all about, you can have everything, don't hold yourself back. There's no concept of service to others rather than service to self. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the role of being a mother, because, and this is another reason why people don't want to become parents, because you have to put your kids first. And it's not very glamorous being a housewife when you are basically told by feminists that you are a slave to the kitchen. You're a slave to your husband and your children and blah, blah, blah. It's not seen as a dutiful, good thing at all. Like you're sort of downtrodden or something. And I always thought that too. But when you really think about it, that kind of devotion is not weak, it's strong, because you're deferring gratification. Eventually, the children do grow up, they do leave home, and you do have your me time. But then you also gain a whole family who are there to support you, So it does work. It's not just that you're giving and you're not getting anything back. And I remember when I was at college and I was doing sociology, and we were learning about the various family systems, and we had the extended family where we had the grandparents living with the family as well, aunties around. So the children were always looked after, if not by their parents, at least they had their grandparents looking after them as well. And then saying, now we've got the nuclear family, which is going to be a bit more difficult because who looks after the kids when the parents go to work? It's going to be a childminder. And now, this was in the 80s. Now it's single family, and the nuclear family is seen as a luxury. Whereas before it was the extended. Does anybody even know what an extended family is anymore? So you can see that the disintegration of the family getting smaller and smaller. And soon it's going to be like, we'll take your children from you as they're born and there's no family left, like in Brave New World. These things are being kind of predicted. And the reason for that is because then the state becomes your family. And it's getting there. You can certainly see the trajectory. So So yeah, I wanted to focus on family this month because it is about that. That's the theme of Taurus, and gaining strength from your roots. And when you've been ripped from your roots, what does a plant do when it hasn't got the sustenance of the earth to feed its roots? It dies. And another thing I wanted to talk about was we don't realize how much school does indoctrinate our children. I mean, I'm very aware of it now because the amount of arguments me my daughter have about general things and history and sexual education and, the gender positive stuff and all the very left-wing. I mean, it's gone extremely left-wing progressive from when I was at school. But I still maintain that this so-called progressiveness is just a continuation of moving things away, further and further away from natural law. And the breakdown of the family is one of those effects. And it does cause arguments between the generations. And you see this all the time. The whole theme of films from the 1960s onwards was always showing these like rebellious hippie children rebelling against their very stuffy, traditional 1950s type parents, you look like a girl with your long hair and all that kind of stuff, the Beatles mop top and all that. But I do think we're coming full circle where it is the hippie parents with very straight and sensible kids who end up mothering their parents, looking after them. You can see it in Absolutely Fabulous, the TV show. I don't know if you get it in America, but that's a really good example of it. So I'm kind of having a vision of the future of the Generation X's in old people's homes, listening to punk. I mean, they were the original social justice warriors, really, weren't they? With the spiky hair and the Mohicans and the weird coloured hair and stuff like that. It all, it cycles of time. It all repeats. It all comes back on itself eventually. And that's what Ceres and Saturn are all about. But I do think it's really weird that people will see if a parent is quite religious and they bring their children up under that religion, it's kind of seen as, you're brainwashing your children to the religion you want them to be. But then the school system is just as bad because it has a doctrine, it has a worldview that is very much all the same. It's its own bubble. And if you step out of the liberal mindset, you're seen as a bigot or racist or homophobic or whatever the words are to use towards somebody who isn't progressive enough, So then you have this generational divide as well, which just follows on from the divide and conquer tactics that we get between men and women and between the races and between whether you're gay or straight. I mean, it's endless. It's endless. But why is this happening? And I watched a very interesting documentary last night by Adam Curtis. He's a British filmmaker, and usually he's quite good. He's got a good reputation to do things that are quite challenging. And I liked his Century of the Self documentary. That was fantastic. But this one was very long. It was 2.5 hours, and it was called Hypereality. And it was basically talking about how computers now, they watch us all the time, so they can sort of program probabilities based on what we're searching for and our likes and dislikes. And then they can serve you things based on your likes and dislikes, So but he said what this is doing now is keeping us in a bubble of whatever we like is reflected back to us, and that's all. So it's like an echo chamber. And so we're never being challenged. And then when we do come across someone who's come out of their bubble, which is probably the polar opposite, and we have definitely got that now with the extreme right and the extreme left, they can't handle it. They think the other person's completely mad. So that's what's happening. But what I thought was interesting was that he couldn't see his own bubble, because although the documentary was pretty good, it was interesting. It talks about Gaddafi and how one minute he was a villain and then the next minute he had to be repackaged as being okay for the West, and then he had to be villainized again. And so he had all those areas quite right, but he missed out a lot. He sort of lied by omission as well, which didn't sort of fit his little narrative too. So he's just as bad. And I think what it boils down to at the end of the day is we're all doing that. And I think that's fine. I think we should live in our bubbles. And if we're happy in our bubbles, just spend time with the people who you get on with in your bubble, but stop criticizing other people for being in their bubbles, because that's how people are. People have their cliquey groups, and people always think their group's better than the other group. And if you end up trying to be objective and seeing things from everybody's points of view, you just end up having nothing. It's just this middle ground. And what also this documentary said was that Gaddafi and Tony Blair had a lot in common, because Gaddafi had this third way sort of politics, and so did Blair, and so was Clinton. And this kind of meeting in the middle, not too left, not too right, ends up, in principle, sounds great. But what happens is that it becomes a nothing, and then it easily attracts people who want to usurp that, where there's people in that middle ground who are trying to please everyone, but people can hack into it and then please themselves, their little group, more, and pretend that they're trying to please everyone. So people aren't playing by fair rules in that case. And so you're giving the appearance of being fair to everyone, but really at the core of it, there are people in there who are definitely pleasing themselves. So that's why I think all politics ends up being in the middle, because it's the beige, it's the bland, it's the not going to offend anyone position. But then let's go back to the cycles of nature. That's something that you cannot avoid. No matter which way politics goes, I think we have periods where things will get quite nationalistic, or they'll get quite right wing, and then they'll turn around and then they'll go back to left wing, and it finds a balance within this kind of system, because it has to. If you push it too far to the left, you'll get a right wing reaction. But I also think if the pendulum just stays in the middle, that's stagnation as well. It can't just hang there, being totally in the middle. You can't have an eternal summer. You can't have an eternal socialist time, because, well, you see what happens when it goes to its extreme. That is not good. Look at Russia. Look at the Soviet Union. It broke down in the end. You look at fashions as well, like in the 70s, the flares just got bigger and bigger. And then it was like, oh, these flares look ridiculous. They are bell bottoms and people are tripping over their platform shoes. And then it goes to the opposite, like the drain pipe, skin tight jeans of the punks, And it always seems to be the way that whatever the last trend was, that people hate it. The trends that are right next to each other, they hate it. And also I've noticed this with the generations too. Sometimes the grandchildren get on better with the grandparents than they do with the mother. If they haven't got on too well with their own mother, that is, I think. So sometimes they have more in common, or they even like their clothes. They might wear the clothes of their grandmother, but they certainly wouldn't wear the clothes of their mothers. Although I think it's kind of changed a little bit now. Our fashions and time spans seem to be getting a little bit messed up, but it certainly used to be the case. So now how I'm viewing this whole political craziness now is just people who are fighting against nature. It's if you accept it as this is just what happens, and it's necessary to have a healthy ecosystem. The seasons are there to replenish the earth, give it a chance to rest. It's not an evil thing. Winter isn't an evil thing. And winter also taught people to defer gratification as well. You had to plan. I mean, this is something that is particular to Northern Europeans. They didn't have food all the year round, so they had to work their arses off during the summer to have stuff for the winter. So I think that is a very unique kind of European genetic mindset, and that's why we also love the tropical zodiac as well, because it's very seasonal. It keeps us in tune with those seasons and accept them. Acceptance is the way to peace, because when you accept something, you're not trying to fight against the grain. And when you think, oh, okay, this is winter time, spring's going to come soon. It's not forever. And as soon as you start fighting that, you're just going to make yourself miserable, really. But then also the fights between the generations are also natural. You need to have play fighting in order to be strong as an individual as you grow old, and you can debate with people. So having interaction between different generations in the family does bring that new perspective. It doesn't keep you in a bubble, because if you're on social media all the time, you are just going to be interacting with people of your own age group, people of the same political persuasion. And it does become an echo chamber. I think the way out of that is through being with family members and doing intergenerational things, which is, it's so refreshing because you get such a different perspective on things. And, the older people can learn from the younger people as well. It's both ways. And one thing as well, learning from different generations of your family, you're learning from actual experience. They have experiences of, say, being in the war, going through rationing, whatever it is. They have first-hand experience of that. It's not something that's told through a history book that might have an agenda. There's nothing more true than people who've actually lived through things. And that's another valuable, important lesson to learn between generations. Now, the image I use for this full moon is of Lady Godiva by John Collier. Now, no one really knows if this was true, but it's a bit of a legend. The typical version of the story was that Lady Godiva took pity on the people of Coventry who were suffering grievously under her husband's oppressive taxation. And he basically said, all right, I'll stop it if you ride through the town naked. So that's what she did. And on the condition that everybody shut their doors, windows, and nobody kind of looked at her as she rode through the town, and she was just covered in her long hair. But apparently some people say that this is actually just a myth of a pagan fertility ritual where a young May Queen was led to the sacred coffers tree, perhaps to celebrate the renewal of spring. But I thought it was a good image because Ceres is also to do with money and pentacles and abundance. It's also about fertility, and it also has the image of the horse, which is also Demeter too. Okay, then that brings me to the end. Please do subscribe, ring the bell, and even better, support me through the Patreon, which you'll see at the very end of the video. All the best. Bye-bye.